insert. Uh-oh.
Oh, that was just me pressing record. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's quite all right.
Yeah, it does that. I mean, Skype, I was using it at the beginning, and I know everybody uses Zoom or StreamYard now, but I don't like this flicking between faces. It's nice that we're both there at the same time.
Oh, sure.
People watching, and plus my living room is so messy that wide scope just really means I've got to clean up more, before we start talking. So I can see the Creepy Acres gang there in the background. Wow.
Oh yeah, there's lots of them back there. They go on for
Wow.
a while, so
Wow, look
yeah,
at that.
they
Look
go
at
all
that.
the way over to the other side. There's probably
Yeah.
I think in total there's probably 50 puppets or so.
And do you use them all at every conference, or is there a set theme? I suppose you don't use Dracula at the Bigfoot conferences, but yeah.
Yeah, basically we just we take probably about 3 of the big ones, maybe 4 of the big ones, and
Yeah.
then maybe 4 or 5 of the smaller ones with us. But
Fantastic.
yeah, and mostly what we do there is we just show them off. We don't really do any live shows. We do mostly just stuff on videos online and stuff.
Okay.
Uh,
What's the word? Ambush clips.
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
with
yeah.
that's,
Yeah, so
love it.
we'll do that kind of
Oh.
stuff, and then when we are at shows, then I'll usually take the Bigfoot out, and because he's kind of like my main character, I'll take him
Mm.
out and walk him through the crowd, and like just like you said, ambush people, like, hey, you having a good time?
It's
Yeah,
the best
whatever.
way.
Yeah.
And if you're not having a good time when you get ambushed for that chirpy Bigfoot, I'm thinking of the lovely sort of pink-faced brown one behind you there. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
I recognized, because we've been talking a little bit sort of back and forth over the years anyway, but I recognized the creations and the Creepy Acres post with the wonderful sort of cryptid post on this day in that year with the great art that's associated with it. And I recognized the name, but I never sort of slotted them together for
Yeah.
some reason. And when I thought, oh, I want to interview the Creepy Acres guy, I want to talk to Shawn, and I started looking sort of online. I was like, oh, Shawn's one of my friends. Okay, the way it happens
Oh
all the
yeah.
time. Like, what I would want to know, and I'm sure you've told this to other people before, but maybe my audience doesn't too much, is how, obviously, clearly you're into Bigfoot, you're into the paranormal and cryptids, but how did that turn into puppeteering and attending conferences and,
Oh
making
sure.
everybody happy?
Oh yeah, no problem. So basically, I always had a love for this paranormal, like Bigfoot and all that sort of stuff. Cryptids especially. I love the monster end of it. And then uh, somewhere along the way, because my day job is creating characters for educational company.
Mhm.
Um, so what ended up happening was I was creating characters for that, and one day somebody said, "Hey, this thing that I had drawn, it was just kind of this furry monster thing." They said it reminded them of one of the Muppets,
Ah,
and and then I got this idea. It's like I could make a puppet. Yeah, all right. So then I went and I made a puppet of that character, and then I really liked it. It was like a lot of fun. So then I started making a bunch of them, and it became a creative outlet outside of work, outside of my day job, where I would do children's art, and it was a way to like flex that creative muscle without doing more drawing, because honestly I was just burned out from drawing all day.
mm.
And so then I started doing puppets, and then at some point it like clicked in my head where I was like, "What? I should do one of Bigfoot, because I love Bigfoot." And so I made one of Bigfoot, and then the next thing I was like, I should make one of Leonard Nimoy because I love the TV show In Search Of. So
I love that
so
show.
yeah. So I ended up making a Leonard Nimoy puppet, not Spock, Leonard Nimoy,
Oh.
specifically, and he's even got the red turtleneck and everything, and just like the show.
Oh, he
Um,
rocked the turtleneck. He
oh yeah.
popularized that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, well the '70s was huge for that. So,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden one day, it just kind of clicked. It was like I just kind of started doing a couple of funny videos here and there with them, and then it was like we should do a show with these because I had so many puppets, And I have friends that do theater stuff and they do voiceover stuff, and so I just started pulling friends together who worked in different areas, and some of them have no background in this stuff at all. It's like, and brought them in, and it's
Okay.
just an excuse to hang out and we just have fun making videos.
It sounds, well, it looks like great fun, actually, and I'm sure it is great fun. But to me, it brings up a wider question about the Bigfoot
Sure.
genre. So in an interview earlier, I was asking the interview, do you think that Bigfoot has gained too much of a cult status, fan-like
Mm,
status, to be a scientific endeavor? And actually, what I think I concluded about it is that actually the fun that goes along with it, having these conferences, encourages further research because people want to be involved, and it's communal. It's a community of
sure.
quite nice people most of the time, actually, sort of,
Yeah.
nice, friendly people that draw you in. And perhaps it's not, detrimental to the scientific aspect. Maybe it's the stimulant.
Sure.
And fun like this, I think, is on the far end of that scale. It's hyper caricature. I
Yeah.
really love it.
I kind of look at what we do it as, I mean, there's the two ends of it, which is you have the people who are already into Bigfoot and the research, and it's sort of, it's fun for them to kind of see Bigfoot doing weird stuff, and like, making, like carving a pumpkin or whatever,
Hmm.
all the goofy stuff. But then I also kind of think of it as that guy who thinks it's all kind of silly nonsense and like doesn't really want to pay attention to it. It gives him an excuse to kind of watch it and then be like, well, what if, like, well, what do you guys think about, like, it kind of gives them an excuse to sort of maybe ask the questions, like the more, like, what about this, what about that, as opposed to, I mean, like guys, like a guy like my dad who he grew up on a farm, very, straightforward,
Okay.
raising cows, all that kind
Mm.
of stuff. He doesn't have time for this nonsense, whatever. But if you get him in the right, if you get someone like that in the right, mind space, it gives them the opportunity to kind of ask these questions that
Mm.
otherwise they would think are silly, you know. And it was, yeah, and it was, and I kind of hope we're doing that, but I don't know. I mean, that's not for me to decide. So
Well, no, I definitely think if you are making, I suppose when you not making a mockery of yourself, but if you make fun of yourself, of course, you open
right,
up the floor for other people not to feel foolish and then ask those questions. So I totally agree with that.
sure,
I think it's a great way forward, but I also just like that there's a fun aspect to it. Now,
hmm,
apart from that, a lot of people might not know, apart from the fun uh, ambush interviews and all the great clips with the puppets, you also, you're an artist. You also do, I call it, on this day, cryptid sort of
yeah,
news. On this day in 1965,
yep,
with an amazing illustration
oh,
of the
thank you,
creature. So I
nice.
recently saw your one of Beeb,
Oh,
one of Beeb's abyssal fish, and I was just like,
yeah,
wow, this is amazing. The colors were amazing. Or the bat beast of Kent, one of
oh,
my
nice.
favorites. Amazing. And I mean, where are you getting these from? Are you obviously you're using the description of the creature, but are
Oh,
you
sure.
basing it on other drawings you've seen elsewhere? Because they don't seem to look like the other drawings I've seen of these creatures
A lot of times, so
stylistically.
oh, sure. Well, so I would say, so I draw all of them myself, and a lot of that comes from, I go back to the original descriptions, and I try not to get caught up in uh, what other people have done, because
Mm,
if when I go back to the original descriptions, I'm sort of basing it off, well, that's what they did, but what am I going to do?
mm,
And some of it also comes from because I want them to look biologically plausible.
mhm,
So it's like, so when they describe like Mothman as being a big bird, or like, because originally it was known as the big bird,
mm,
then I give it more bird-like legs, even though it, in the later descriptions, they say it had legs like a man, stuff like that. Or and then that also then kind of ties into when I did, um, the Beast of Kent, then I kind of tied it into the Mothman, so I kind of gave it those more bird-like legs, even though there's really no description of its legs that I can find.
No, there isn't a great description. I mean,
It
they say that it shuffles, which is, I
Yeah,
suppose, would imply short legs in a way, perhaps, but I
I
don't
have no
know.
idea.
It's hard to say. It's one of those really,
Yeah.
really odd sightings. That actually brings up a very interesting question. As an
Okay.
artist, as somebody that can who looks for those smaller details, who can essentially create something from a verbal description, what you notice there with the Mothman, its physiological appearance changing over time in descriptions.
Mhm.
Have you noticed that with other creatures like Bigfoot and Dogman?
Well, Chupacabra, 100%.
Mm,
I mean, the original descriptions of Chupacabra very much describe what many would consider like an alien gray, except
mm,
I mean, I believe it even had gray skin, and it has big red eyes, and it has what looks like sort of spikes or quills sticking out of its
mm.
back, and then it has kind of backwards legs, uh, and it just sounds very alien. And then by the time we get to the mid 2000s, like 2010 or so, all of a sudden now we have you know what looks like a dog. I mean, it just looks like a
Yeah,
dog. Like it
yeah,
looks like a
yeah,
dog with
yeah.
blue eyes. And so that, and I don't know if there is a connection between those two things,
Mm.
or if they are simply um we're just giving the name to this other animal that and
Yeah,
just labeling it that.
I wondered if that was something to do with now. I recently did a book looking at humanoids around the world, and what I actually often found is a lot of cultures have words they use for one word they use for lots of things. So in the Yeti, for instance, you've got this description that can be applied to this name that can be applied to bears, to other large animals, and it's the same actually all around the world, and in the Americas it's the same too. And I wondered if it's that the locals in those places, perhaps that in Mexico especially, are seeing various unknown things and labeling them chupacabra. That's a chupacabra.
Yeah,
And that would explain that the variation in description. They are all describing different things, but that's the name they've got for
oh
something
sure.
unusual.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. I mean, where we call anything, anything that comes out of a flying saucer or a UFO, we call it an alien. So then
Mm.
alien becomes like a bucket term, or like Bigfoot. Bigfoot's become sort of a catch-all for
Oh
anything with a
yeah.
lot of hair. Like it just
Mm.
becomes, the Yeti. Oh, is that a kind of Bigfoot? Well, I don't know. It feels like it's its own thing, but it's like
Mm.
we just started throwing, orang pendex and we have the skunk ape, and like all these things just kind of fall into this category. So yeah, I could see that being that maybe chupacabra just becomes a catch-all for unknown, some unknown small animal. It's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be really interesting to me actually to present you with 100 years of Nessie sightings,
Yeah.
with all their descriptions, and see throughout the decades how your drawings differed
Oh
from
yeah.
those descriptions all the way along. I'm sure there would be a great variation in the way that people describe things. Although some people would say that's also to do with the commonality of certain animals in the mental library of people of those times.
Oh
So,
sure.
for example, people in the 1930s seeing a humped creature with a long neck, well, they would plunge into their mental library and say that was like a camel,
Hmm.
meaning it had humps and a long neck, a strange horse-like head, instead of it was a giant reptilian beast with a
Yeah.
horse-like head and two big humps, 40 foot
Right.
long, swimming in the water. And, therefore you get some of these camel-like drawings, in fact, wandering into the loch at that time. Or I think there's one that even looks like a slug, a spicer,
Hmm.
1950s road crossing. And, it's interesting to me to hear that from an artist's perspective, because I'm always dealing with sightings. And yet, within those sightings, it's very clear when somebody doesn't have the words to describe what they've seen, and
Hmm.
everything they have to put across to you is ill-fitting.
Hmm.
It's almost an amalgam of all these different things. Now, how does that affect the work that you do? Do you take fresh sightings, or are you only ever working on historical records of these animals when you draw them?
Well, a lot of times I try to go to the original source, and so we do, because then, as you know, like throughout time, they kind of change. Like, so for
Mm.
example, the Yeti, like the original descriptions of the Yeti, it's got red hair, and and but now in pop culture, the Yeti is white.
Mm.
It's always
Yeah,
white. It's always, and I'm guessing a lot of that comes from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Christmas special, where the
ah,
Bumble
okay.
is white and he's got a
Ah,
blue face, and now that's the way people draw Yetis. Because
that makes
that's
sense.
effect. Yeah, and I don't know
Yeah.
if that's where that came from, but that certainly seems to be around the time
I've never
that
heard of
that
a single white Yeti sighting in all of my research. Not
no,
one. Not ever.
right.
Yeah.
But whenever someone draws a Yeti, or paints a Yeti, they're all white. So I don't know why. Um, so when it comes to that, when it comes to like doing some of these sighting or doing some of these drawings, I know that sometimes what I'm drawing is wrong, and it's purposefully wrong
Mhm.
because I want it to be different. And I mean,
Uh-huh.
and not purposely wrong in the sense that it's like I'm going against what they said. I'm going against what became the norm after.
Uh-huh.
For the example, the uh, what's the crazy critter of Bald Mountain. It was one of the more recent ones, and
Okay.
it describes a horse-like creature. It's only described as being the size of a horse, and it
Uh-huh.
has tentacles instead of legs, and it has a
Oh.
football-shaped head.
Mm.
Yeah, and it has
Mm.
big bug eyes. And so every other representation I've seen of that, it turns the head like football, so it's like a
Mm.
horse head pointed at you. But because it describes it having bug eyes, I turned it sideways. It's got big bug eyes on each side of the on that head. And I know that is not traditionally how people have drawn it, but nowhere does it say that's not correct. It's like no one verified that's what it's supposed to look like. They just kind
No.
of went with it. So
Well,
yeah,
it's hard. It's really hard. That I think we need more of that actually. And I think as a sort of a field investigator, when I get a description, it would be good to have somebody that's used to drawing from
mm,
descriptions just on site. I had one recently, in Scotland,
mm-hmm,
actually. It wasn't 2019 it happened, but it was recently given to me. And this lady's staying in a holiday cabin at their lodge
okay,
with her family, had basically seen what she described as like a huge chimp face and shoulders staring at her in the kitchen window. The windows kind of intersect there, and they're about that window. You'd have to be sort of to be head and shoulders in there. You'd have to be at least 8 feet tall, you know.
oh boy,
And she even described the leathery hands sort of tapping on the window, two fingers like this.
mm,
And yet, with all the descriptions she gave me, I couldn't really reconcile what she was describing as chimp-like in appearance. The descriptive elements of it. I thought, well, is that just the closest thing that she can find in her
sure,
mind to it? Because these little features she's describing, they don't seem like chimp-like features at all. But it's
right,
hairy, it's sort of monkeyish, I suppose, and that's what she's got. Whereas, to have somebody, an expert, hint, hint, didn't mention no names, on site, yeah, it would have been great. It would have been really great. How about theories? Do you ever get into like theories within the genre and what certain cryptids could be? Because you're there, you're trying to put this thing together.
sure.
What kind of opinions do you have? So for Bigfoot, for instance, what kind of theory would you have about its its genus, its identity, from all of the descriptions and drawings you've had to put
Sure.
into action?
Well, and Bigfoot is a like something like that. It's hard because there's this long, rich history of sightings that, in theory, predate Western civilization showing up. So in theory, it's been part of the native culture, and so then now you're kind of stuck with, well, is this a memory
Mm,
of like Gigantopithecus, like that they did actually at one point live,
mhm,
there with them, or had crossed paths with them, and it's just kind of remained part like, and it's a story based culture, so they keep passing it on, passing it on, passing it on, and then eventually this animal that they no longer see has now kind of been deified to almost like a legend
Mm.
status among them. I honestly don't know, because if this thing is still living out there this long, I mean, I mean, whatever it is, I mean, it has to be smart enough to avoid detection. It's like it has to be smart enough to know that people are looking for it. So then at that point, are you dealing with something? I mean, is it subterranean? I mean, does it live in caves? I mean, it has to be able to not be spotted, because
Mm.
there's so many, so many people flying around with drones and cameras and and helicopters and like out in the wilds looking for this stuff and still not finding it. So that's where, like, and I know this is where the interdimensional Bigfoot thing
Mm.
has now sort of come up, because they
Yeah.
had to come up with a reason why it's not being found. So, um, but honestly, I don't know. I mean, most of the stuff is easy to, you can imagine. Uh, for example, like one of my favorite things to bring up is, I'm a firm believer that a lot of dogman sightings are actually just kangaroos. Hear me out.
No, I think no. I'm with
Yeah,
you on that. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
I'm
Yeah,
not saying all.
kangaroos.
Yeah,
No.
I'm not, and I'm not saying all, but I'm just saying that, because like here in the United States, there are certain states where you do not need a license to have a kangaroo,
Mm.
and or a permit to have one, as a pet. And so and back in the I believe it was the '60s, and I think the UK went through the same thing, where they passed a law for exotic pets that you had to have certain, uh,
1976.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so a lot of people, I think, just abandon those animals, and all of a sudden in the '70s, like, you start having these bizarre sightings,
Mm.
that start ramping up, and then, uh, I don't know, and my guess is, if you're living in Wisconsin and you're not expecting to see a kangaroo,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, and it's the middle of the night, and you see something on the side of the road, and all of a sudden it stands up and turns around and looks at you.
Mm.
It's like, and if it's facing right at you, I could see where, in a panic, that looks like a dog man,
Oh, I
or
think definitely. In some cases, for sure. If you see a large male kangaroo, they're ripped. They're
oh, they're huge.
huge.
There aren't,
And
yeah, and
they could tear
they're
your
built like,
arms off, they're really
yeah,
strong. Mm.
yeah, oh, yeah, and the weird thing is, they do, like, they're from the waist up, their upper body looks like a person,
Mm.
like, the arms are at the sides,
Yeah. Pectoral
yeah,
muscles. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
but
I can definitely see that as a possibility for many sightings. If you see one of those things in the dark, sort of menacing at you, you definitely would be taken
yeah,
aback by that. That's for sure. Um, some of the sightings I've had, though, it's kind of hard to really
oh, yeah,
fit it into that category. But I
oh,
think
absolutely,
again, monster imposters has to be the first go-to in any
yeah,
situation because that's the most plausible explanation, other than there being a monster of some
right.
kind.
Well,
You know.
well, because then, the granted, it doesn't fit for all of them, and it doesn't fit for all sightings. Some of them are just too bizarre, like, they
Yeah.
just don't. It's not going to work. But once you get rid of some of these odd sightings, and again, I know Wisconsin, and even where I live in Minnesota, we have had kangaroo sightings. Where they've seen
Mm.
them in the woods, and there's photos of them and stuff, and it's always like, oh, this is weird. Uh, but once you get rid of that, like those missed sightings, you're still left with weird ones where you're like, I
Yeah.
don't know what that is. Like, I don't know what it could be. Because I'm not a research. I'm more of an armchair researcher. Like, all my research is
Yeah.
done via, like, old newspapers and books, and I'm not in the field, so I don't know what these people are seeing.
Well, yes. I mean, but then you have that added bonus of the interpretive bonus of being able to translate what people are saying into
Sure.
visual aids, if you will, visual descriptions, which is, I think, is a really big talent. And of course, everybody has a built-in bias as to what they're interpreting, but I would imagine that's filtered out a bit more, especially if you've been a jobbing artist for a long time and had to do what the client wants of you. You'd be used
Oh
to
yeah.
just getting that out. And all you guys, you know what those clients can be like. They can be demanding, can't they?
Oh
So
yes.
I was just
Yes.
saying you were disciplined.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, I think absolutely, definitely, that could be, that could be very possible. Now, you may not know here in the UK, we actually have a population of wallabies that live in the
Really?
country. Yeah, there's some in Staffordshire, there's some in Scotland. They're sort of dotted around the place, but are they are I would say endemic. They're endemic in those areas. They exist. We're on like it would be like seventh, eighth generation, perhaps even in some
Sure.
cases. We also have a population of big cats that's not admitted to, but it's become kind of so obvious that we've
Right.
got them. And again, this goes back to the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976, which you just mentioned, and they had a similar act there in which people just said, okay, I've got to have this massive enclosure for this big cat with room to run around and air conditioning and a water source. I can't afford that. The zoos aren't going to take them. I'm just going to have to let it go. And we
Right.
mostly see, not always, but mostly see pumas, mountain lions, or melanistic leopards,
Hmm.
black leopards. And I was saying to the other interviewee earlier that I wanted to write a paper at one point to say that it's very possible, if this is proven as a fact that we have all of these big cats, or the sightings are taken into consideration, hundreds, thousands even, that we might have one of the highest population of melanistic leopards in the world
I'm sure. Yeah.
because they were popular pets and they were bred as pets because they were black and they were beautiful. But in
Yeah.
nature, they're rare. So,
Oh
in the same
wow.
way that America has a massive population of the world's tigers in
Yep.
captivity because they're bred there, we might have, and it's speculation only from the sightings, this massive population of melanistic leopards,
Wow. Okay.
panthers. So it's funny, it's strange, but those are the ones. And in fact, my sister-in-law saw one just in Wales. That's where we're from. Just the other day, she's got no skin in the game, like none. Very down
Yeah.
to earth girl, not interested in all this crazy hocus pocus, all the
Yeah.
monsters and big cats and all that stuff. Her and her daughters are driving. The daughters say they can see a bear at the side of the road in the field. It's a bit countryside-ish. They pull over, and she said to me, I saw this big black cat that looked like a lion. So that's her sort of mental
Mm.
library kicking in now.
Yep.
I don't know that it's not a lion, but it's big like a lion as far as I can see, and it's moving what I would imagine a lion to look like, but it's all black. We watched it
Yeah.
for 2 minutes and then we left. It was still there. And I thought, wow, and this happens week in, week out, week in. And I'm sure with other creatures, it's the same thing. Nobody in the United States would have any idea that kangaroos are bouncing about the place.
Right. Right.
In the same ways, we would be surprised to see a wallaby rock up suddenly. It's not common knowledge,
Right.
and yet there they are. So yeah. I mean, I hope it's not kangaroos. I hope it is something terrifying like the dogman. But, you know,
Well, well, and the thing is, like I said, I believe that. I mean, I believe that that only would explain some of them, not all of them.
mm,
So then once you get past that, it's like, well, what are you left with? It's like I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know what that is, and it is like I do want it so badly to be a
yeah,
dog man. Like I want it so badly to be the monster, because it's
yes,
cool and
yeah.
it's far more interesting.
It is wonderful. I think that's part of this genre. It's wonderful to think things that are not discovered still
Yeah.
exist in our world, and we know that from set genus of species. You discover a new type of snake or a new type of frog or a new whale now and again, which is big. That was discovered in Baja, California, just last year, I think, or the year before. A new type of whale, a large whale.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, you say, but to discover something like a Nessie or a Bigfoot or, you know,
Yeah.
a like we have the owlman here, a 5, 7, 8 feet tall owl, red eyes.
Oh yeah.
That would be something altogether different. So you guys, you did the conferences. Did you all the conferences or?
Well, we're pretty limited in what we do. It's basically wherever I can drive to in a day.
Hmm,
So that's pretty
okay.
much what we're limited doing. Um, but we did, because of COVID, we were kind of stuck for a
Yeah.
long time, not being able to do much of anything. But this year we were like, let's get out there and
Hmm,
finally get back at it. So we started small, and we did. We just went. So I'm in Minnesota, and we went down to Iowa, and we went to the Van Meter Visitor Festival.
oh,
Um,
cool.
which I don't know if you're familiar with the Van Meter Visitor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So it's a whole festival based around that, and got to hang out with some amazing people. I got to meet. I was hanging out with authors Chad Lewis and Kevin Lee Nelson, who have done.
Wow.
Uh, they did the Wendigo book. They
Mm.
did a book on the Van Meter Visitor, uh, and Peppy, who's kind of Minnesota, Wisconsin's. It's sort of like our Loch Ness monster.
Hmm.
But also got to hang around Tanya and Laura Cram from the podcast, the Spooks, Creeps, and Assorted Delray podcast. It's
Okay.
just great. I mean, it's just such a great community of people,
Mm.
and um, yeah, and it's just fascinating. And then, uh, but we also did the Wendigo Festival,
Wow.
which is it was actually more of a Halloween themed horror movie festival. So we did that as something different, and we kind of snuck in as oh yeah, and cryptids too, you know. But so we did that for a while. We got to meet a lot of just a lot of artists making things uh, with like bones and like hair, and it's just it's creepy,
Wow.
but it's like
Like proper FX stuff,
oh yeah, I mean
props and everything.
oh yeah, and so you have people that are there that are making crafts, but you also have people there who are doing like movie level special effects and stuff.
Mm.
And they also had Kane Hodder, who's the actor who played Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th movies.
Okay.
So he was there. So I was like, we got to see him. That was cool.
Wow.
They had a guy dressed as a Wendigo walking around, and so that was
Wow.
great.
Did he
And
costume up? The
oh yeah, he
the
was all costumed up. They kept him in a
really?
cage. They kept him in a cage outside, and
We
then he would, yeah. And then sometimes they'd let him out, and he'd walk around.
oh, what a gig.
Yeah,
Was it
but
sunny or was it hot or out
um,
there? Or?
it for being the time of year it was perfect. It was great. The sun
Okay,
was out.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
sun was
I
out.
mean, it
It was
wasn't like baking in the cage all day, basically.
no, nothing like that.
I wonder
No.
how much you got paid for the gig. Like, okay, we need you to, get back into the costume. It's like, listen, I've made like 15 of these movies.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I'm really tired. Like, come on, just this one time. Okay, I'm coming. The money sounds good. So where am I going to be? Well, see this cage outside.
They even had him. So the guy that was dressed as the Wendigo was
Mm.
on. He was on stilts.
Oh
Like,
wow.
but they're more of those like the acrobatic stilts.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's all done up, and he's like, he can't see anything outside
Oh
of this
no.
mask. But they kept him in there, and they had bands going
Wow.
all day. It was crazy. I
Sounds
mean,
like a great time.
it was just a huge party.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then the last one we did was just a very small local one that was actually, I mean, maybe 20 minutes from my house, and it was so close. We're like, wow, we got it. Yeah, we got to do that one. And that had all kinds of stuff. You had paranormal investigators. You had people that investigate ghosts, and you had people that they actually had a all female Bigfoot hunting group that was there. That is that is the Squatch Hers. So there's
Oh
two of them here in
yes.
Minnesota, the Squatch Hers and the She
Yeah.
Squatchers.
The she
Um,
squatches I know
yeah, so
really
they're
well.
based.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're actually based out of Fargo, and the Squatch
Uh-huh.
Hers are based out of Minneapolis. They used to be one group, and they split into two.
Oh, I never knew that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that bit. Okay, wow. Okay, but it's
So
still two great names.
oh yeah.
Scotchers and the She Scotchers. It's you know what? I just think the genre has and Creepy Acres, by the way, that's a dynamite name. That's an
Oh,
amazing
thank you
name.
so much. Oh, thank you.
You know.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean this I can even sort of envisage the
Uh,
plot, you know,
oh,
of
thanks.
the Creepy Acres. Welcome your stay, enjoy your stay at the Creepy
Yeah.
Acres. Um, so that's really amazing. You mentioned the Wendigo earlier, by the way, and
Yep.
I was actually wondering about that because I did a little bit about the Skinwalker, which I
Hmm.
know is a little different, but it has some similarities to the Wendigo in some ways. And I tried to frame it as a possible real undiscovered animal. And there are aspects physically of it, or descriptions vary again in this, but is that the same with the Wendigo? I haven't really studied it. Does it have are there overwhelming animal-like qualities like the skinwalker can have as well, or is it, we're just talking about a ghostly, a supernatural creature?
Sure. Well, so if you go to the original stories about the Wendigo, what you're dealing with is essentially it's like the Native American version of a zombie. I mean, but like a ravenous zombie, the ones that chase
Okay,
you down, not the
okay,
dragging their feet, but
okay.
it's also kind of more ghostly. And so then what ends up happening is somewhere along the way, artists start adding more and more sort of natural
Okay.
like elements to it, and eventually it gets the antlers that we
Uh-huh.
see. That so that's actually an art that was actually added by artists. That wasn't from the original folklore, but now that's part of it. And then it went from antlers, and now it's a full deer skull. You know, that's like
So this
for the
is
head.
almost like a Herne the Hunter sort of interpretation, like a European
Yeah.
add-on in a way, like a colonial transplant.
Well, and that's very possible because I would almost hazard to guess that whoever did add the full stag skull
Mm.
to this to the Wendigo probably was European, or or was it was a white dude.
Yeah, well,
So
exactly. No,
yeah.
but it's I only mention that really because in some of the studies I've done, there was a theory I had that many of the uh, Central and South American native legends were affected, as well as the North American ones, by the initial European colonization.
Hmm.
And in later years, when they were forgotten, they were sort of reinterpreted and fed back to the Europeans as
Yeah.
native folklore. So you have things like the duende, for example. It's also
Hmm.
very popular in Portugal and Spain, as well as the Americas, South America, and Central America, and Brazil even. And you're thinking, well, actually, this is very similar to Puck, the English Puck, the mischievous fairy, or which is like Puka in Irish and Welsh. And then I think of the Pukwudgie or the Bookwus or the
Yeah.
Pucks, and I think, did we send that name there? And but maybe they have the creature, maybe it had something similar, but was the name sort of mashed into the language and reinterpreted to explain to us, the us of then, what it was they were talking about?
Sure.
And say, oh, well, the little thing books, that's a bookwus, that's a puck, whatever it is, a pukwudgie. And so we would get it, the us of that time. I always
Yeah.
wonder if, is this like a Peter effect? You know?
It's very possible. I always kind of wonder very much on the same very much in the same train of thought. I always wondered why is Yeti, Yeren, Yowie, the Yahoo, like those, they're all this kind of
Mm,
this, they're all like hairy, they're all like Harry Wildman sort of things,
yeah,
but found in completely on different continents. But they're all
yeah.
like but
The
they're all like
yeah,
Yeti,
something, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so then again, is that what's happening? I don't know. I mean, like, but I think that's a wonderful possibility
Mm.
of, it's us feeding them something who then feed it back, but now we take it back as their original legend. you know
Yeah, we say, oh yeah, this was the Native American legends speak of, and then if
yeah.
you go back into it, it's like possibly the thing that we sort of interpreted through our language then, or something we brought over as a superstition. Not always, in
Sure.
part, they get melded together. And I'm sure that the forebears of those communities have also forgotten where it came
Hmm.
from. It just is
Right.
suddenly, and it's a strange thing. You see that in the UK all the time because there's so many influences here.
Sure.
There's the original Celtic influence of the island, which is a part of the island I come from. But my family
Hmm.
background is Irish. I grew up in Wales. They have that early British influence still very much in all of their words and their thinking. And then there's the English influence, which is the Danes and the Angles and the Saxons and the Normans and everything else. And you've got the Scots and the Gaelics and everything mixed in together. There's lots of Celtic words which we think are our own words, but they're not the Latin words. They're Roman words. They
Yeah.
come from miles away, or runes, for example. we think this is like a Northern European way of writing, whereas actually it's probably derived directly from some of the Italic tribes that they encountered near Romania and sort of
Sure.
brought back with them as a form of writing that they could use because they had straight lines, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. And yet this is big symbol of, old Viking culture that was also just Roman. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, it's fascinating to think about, like that sort of where things just sort of bled together, and you can't really tell where one thing ended and where the other began, and it becomes
mm,
almost it becomes like a centuries long game of telephone,
mm,
where it's just like, yeah, it just all becomes a huge amalgam of just all the stuff. For example, when you were talking about the puckwudgie, there is that is the did you know were they were the Native Americans talking about, well, we have this little furry man that causes, like gets into mischief and whatever. Then then a European says, oh, that kind of sounds like Puck. We have
mm.
something like that. And they're like, oh, well, you must mean Puck. Like, and then they're like, oh, no, it's like we got our own thing. You mean Puck. Like, all right, fine, we mean,
Yeah,
like
sure.
it.
What
Sure,
you said.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you said. And then does it become, is it that simple? Because I know here in the United States we have, you'll find like reoccurring, and I'm sure it's the same over there, but you have
Mm,
reoccurring urban legends.
mm.
Like, any place where there's a train trestle bridge where people have died, it's a goat man. It's always a goat man. There's a goat
Oh,
man that lives on
really?
the, yeah. It's like there's always going to be some case like that,
Oh,
or a lot of places we have these bridges where people will, there'll be a legend of a woman, be like either it'll be like a woman was, heartbroken, and she, like threw her children off the bridge, or whatever, and
okay.
now her ghost wanders, crying, looking for her children, and
Hmm.
but then that legend appears all over the place, and it'll get like a name like Crybaby Bridge, and
Okay.
and there'll be like four
Okay.
of them in different, all different states. So is that sort of a smaller version of what's happening globally when it comes to cryptids and things where people are just sort of uh, they're just kind of taking they're just sort of like borrowing stories from
I
other
mean,
areas.
yeah. I mean, definitely. When you look at what happened to the world in colonialism, I'm not. I don't have any opinions on that. The past is the past, and the
Hmm.
situation we live in now is what it is. We all just
Right.
have to live alongside each other. But when you look at the way things moved across, when you look at something like Puck and
Hmm.
see similarities to it in North America, where the English colonialists were and some of the French, and you look at something like the Duende and see that represented there again in Spain and Portugal, and then the Latin-speaking
Hmm.
countries. It's a clear divide. It's a clear
Right.
transplant there. You can see, and they
Sure.
haven't crossed over, so that's fine. One thing that did about the superstitions, of bridges, and everything else that you're talking about, that did occur to me is that you ever hear the fact about Greeks smashing plates at parties, right?
Oh yeah, I know.
They
Yeah, I've heard
don't
that.
they don't do
Yeah.
that in Greece.
Okay.
The only Greeks who do it are the Greeks that live in other countries. So it's the Greeks who left and kept the tradition. But since that time in Greece, the tradition no longer exists. It only exists in the colony that moved away.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
And I think that in the Americas, in some of the other New World countries as well, perhaps in Australia to some degree, some of those superstitions that were taken that were fresh at that time that have since dissipated in the home
Hmm.
country remain because
Oh,
that's
okay.
the point at which the separation occurred.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, well, we're coming up now. Christmas is coming, but we have Krampus.
Oh yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, so like that, that remained. I'm assuming a larger thing in European countries.
Mm,
It came over here a little bit. I know my mom would talk about when she was a little girl. Her grandmother had this scary old mask that she'd pull out
mm,
around like before Christmas, and like would put it on, laugh, and like scare the kids and whatever. And she never really knew what it was. And grandma eventually passed
mm.
on, and no one, the mask just kind of went away. And she was like, I don't know what that is. And it wasn't until like years later that when I just started describing Krampus to her, that she sort of, it clicked, and she was like, "Oh, that's what that was."
Mm.
But it's interesting because now it's sort of becoming a thing again here in the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah.
It's like resurging, mostly at breweries, but whatever. but
Yeah.
but as you
Well, all
know,
of those northern European cultures, they have a big drinking tradition over that time, so that makes for it to appear more around breweries. It's actually perfect. It's
right?
the perfect location for it. We don't have it in England, actually. We don't do it.
Oh, okay,
But I know in Germany it's very popular in some other
sure,
sort of northern places. Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah, that makes it, yeah, and it actually makes sense because my family would have had German heritage on that side, so yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay.
It's just I love it. It's interesting, and now that the world, not to talk geopolitics again, but now the world seems to be going through another shift of perspective.
Hmm.
It's kind of weird. Something this multipolar thing that's emerging seems to be showing people or people's more of what they have in common. And I think even here in the UK now, people look. They probably did to America a lot in the past, but people look at America and New Zealand and Australia as sort of kindred in a way. Like, oh, they say, oh, we're kind of the same peoples. Okay, we get that.
Oh,
This Anglo
okay.
sort of thing. We're sort of the same culture in a way. Um, and then that happens in the Latin-speaking countries in Europe as well with the Americas and so on and so forth all around the place. And it's interesting to me to look at these legends and then ratify that. So that's because we sort of had similar origin points. And it's
Sure.
weird. It's not weird, but it's interesting to see where we are along that journey. Where some have stopped off and some have continued, and so on and so forth, and how it affects us. Because the United States culture, it's the dominant culture in our Western world. So we now look to you guys, I think, for cultural input, and sometimes we'll get back culture that left us in the first place. It's
Oh,
strange in the
sure.
new format, and I just love that. And I think it's this
Yeah.
wonderful circle of reinterpretation. That sort
Yeah.
of runs through the lifeblood of all these cultures and nations. Um, just quickly before we go, I just wanted to go over where you guys, where people can see you next, where you're going to be, how they can find you online, and is there are there things to buy? Is there merch to buy? Are there things they can get hold of?
Okay. Oh, sure. So you can find us at creepyacres.com. We're also, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It's always Creepy Acres under any of those. We're also, if you go to tpublic.com, that's our merch stores on there. That's where you'll find T-shirts. You can buy a towel if you. I think we got towels. I don't know.
Towels are great.
Yeah.
Everybody
We
needs
got,
towels.
yeah, we got pillows. We got, I don't know. It's pretty much anything. Um,
That's a perfect Christmas present. I
yeah,
think towels and pillows,
yeah,
exactly. And anybody listening, this is exactly what you
yeah,
need. You know that
yeah.
you need a creepy towel for Christmas.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And most of it just features some of our characters and whatever, but then some of it does feature some of the art from the this day in creepy history posts. We've been slowly moving, transitioning that stuff out there, but I'm only one guy, so it takes time. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. Well, Shawn, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and especially after following your work very closely for all these years and realizing we were secret friends,
well,
and I never knew. Yeah, thank you so much.
well, I have to thank you and let you know that I actually was a big fan of yours. Beast of Britain was that was fantastic. I love that. I
Oh,
actually
thank
found
you.
that on audible.com and then went
Wow.
back and bought the book. so
Oh, wow.
so
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually had heard it, listened to the whole thing, loved it so much, went and bought the book.
Oh,
So yeah.
that's a great testimony. I love that narrator, actually. He narrated both of my books. I gave him a great review. I think I said I couldn't have said it better myself.
They're absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I look I look forward to whatever else you you know do because I'm a
And
fan. So
well,
this is great.
well, the feeling's mutual, and that's a nice thing to realize, because I've been seeing the creepy stuff, I see the clips, and I especially love the on this day in
Oh,
this
thanks.
year this cryptid appeared, because I'm always like, and sometimes when I've been researching stuff, I've not been able to find a date or something's been missing. I've been
Yeah.
like, oh, hang on a second, let's see what Shawn has. Oh, it's 1965. Cool.
Yeah. And as far as I know, we've only gotten one wrong, and that was Dr. Carl Schuker put us straight. So we had the wrong
Oh,
date
Carl's really
for
nice like that.
yeah, for Trunco, and he was very nice, and I
Yeah.
was like, I can't take it down, it's too late, but I'll fix it for next time. So
It's one of his areas of expertise, Trunco, I think. I think he was
oh
one of
yeah,
the main sort of people coming. Now, for anybody else that really, I've got loads of Carl's books, and I don't think I would know anything. My biggest challenge I find when I'm trying to write now is trying to write about something that Carl hasn't covered,
oh yeah.
and it's so difficult. So occasionally I check the blog and I'm like, oh, okay, he's got that. He's got that one as well. He got okay. Just write source
He's,
Carl Schuker. You're gonna have to, he's done everything. But he's such
yes,
a super, super chap as well. Pleasant
wonderful.
and nice, and just like an example to us all.
Oh, he's
Really
awesome.
is. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much. Everybody get out there, get the Creepy Acres merch just before Christmas, and it's gonna keep you dry and comfy, and you're just gonna love it. Shawn, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.